Good evening. With Chapter 1, we begin our study of the Earth and the environment, and more specifically, what impact the actions of man are having on the proper functioning of the Earth and environment, and what the potential consequences are of man's actions, both on his future and the future of the entire planet. Chapter 1 begins with the story of the people of Easter Island. You may be more familiar with the island because of the very unique statues which have been built on the island and which have been the subject of a lot of conjecture as to what they represent and how they were built. However, for our purposes, what we're more concerned with is what happened to the people that inhabited the island. It's believed that the original inhabitants of the island came there from South America a number of years ago, and once there were totally isolated from all other land and all other islands. And as a consequence, they had to depend upon only the resources of Easter Island to support them. It is believed that back then, when they first came to the island was completely covered with trees, but that in order to build their civilization, in order to possibly help move those big stone icons, the people of the island gradually and then eventually completely cut down all of the trees on the island. The consequence of this was that by removing the trees and the roots which helped to hold the soil of the island in place, they inadvertently allowed the island to be depleted of its topsoil due to erosion from wind and rain. And as the topsoil became depleted, the ability of the island to sustain the people was less and less because they couldn't grow as much food. As the food supply shrunk, wars developed between the people on the island over the food, and in the space of a couple of hundred years, the people of the island became almost extinct because of fighting each other for the limited resources that were left on the island. So, what does Easter Island have to do with us today and with this chapter? That can be seen on this graph here. I always start with this graph because of the fact that it very succinctly and very starkly tells the story of everything that's important about what we're studying in this course. Basically, what we see here is the population of the Earth from the early 1000s up through projected the year 2500. The thing that is noteworthy is that it took all of humanity up until the mid-1800s in order to come to a total population of 1 billion people. But it only took an additional 100 years for the population to double to 2 billion. And it only took another 45 years for the population to double again to 4 billion. And it's projected that the population of the Earth will double yet again to 8 billion by 2027. And in fact, the population of the world as of 2012 stands at actually 7 billion. It's estimated that the world has doubled its population just since 1970. Furthermore, it's estimated that 5 to 10% of all the people who have ever lived on our planet are currently alive today. You'll note from the curve that we are in the middle at this point, and actually past the middle, of the steepest growth curve of the human population in all of its history. And this rapid large increase in the population of humanity is putting a great strain on the world's resources, just like the people of Easter Island. If we cannot find a way to curb our population growth rate and or to substantially increase and improve the resources available to our planet to grow food and support its population, then we, like the people of Easter Island, may end up falling into wars and killing each other over the resources that are left. In this chapter, we'll be introduced to the topic of environmental science, which is a study of how the world works. And we're going to see some examples of how the world is currently not working. That is, ecosystem decline, the increase of human population that we've talked about, loss of biodiversity, and global climate change, and the impact that these things are having on our planet and our ability to support our increasing population. We'll also get an introduction into the modern environmental movement, beginning with President Teddy Roosevelt in the United States and his efforts to set aside large tracts of virgin land in the United States to preserve it for the future, as well as to help maintain ecosystems and our study and understanding of those ecosystems. In this chapter, we'll also be introduced to three unifying themes that will be repeated over and over again as we progress through the other chapters in the book. The first and most important issue is something we call sustainability. Sustainability is the ability of an ecosystem to supply the needs of the living organisms within that system in such a way that it does not deplete the resources of that ecosystem, such as what happened on Easter Island. In the case of Easter Island, you had too many people trying to draw upon too few resources, and it led to the complete collapse not only of the ecosystem, but of the people that depended upon that ecosystem. So key to all of our study in this course is going to be looking at how can we be assure that the Earth, which is our Easter Island, is able to continuously supply the food and other resources we need to sustain us as a human population. Key to sustainability is understanding how the world works. And for that reason, we're going to depend upon understanding the issue of sound science. We can't make adequate judgments about what's happening to the ecosystem and the environment if we don't understand how it functions. And we can't do things to improve the ecosystem or at least prevent it from being harmed if we don't know how it operates through the understanding and use of sound science. So we shall continue to emphasize the issue of sound science throughout the chapters and throughout the text. And then finally is the issue of stewardship. Stewardship means to take care of something. It's necessary for us to realize, and others have said as much, that the world has been not given to us, but lent to us to use as we see fit, but to pass on to future generations in at least as good a condition as which we got it. And so as we go through the various topics in this course, we're going to touch upon the issue of stewardship and what we can do individually and as a population and as a humanity to help improve the environment and to prevent its degradation. And finally, we're going to look at some of the issues that are necessary in order to move towards a sustainable future. We'll see that sustainability, as far as it applies to what we as human beings are doing on this planet is concerned, requires the intersection of a number of very complex variables. In order to come up with a sustainable solution to a given environmental problem, we need to be able to find a solution that is both socially desirable, ecologically viable, and which is economically feasible. And as we'll see, that is not always an easy thing to accomplish, and many times requires a great deal of exercise of political will in order to overcome the barriers against such sustainable solutions. And yet we will see some very important pieces of legislation that were enacted in the United States that have gone a long way to helping preserve our environment and help us reach sustainable solutions for our environmental problem. So, in order to achieve sustainable solutions to the world's environmental problems, we need to be able to elect officials, politicians, and other people in power who understand the issues and are willing to exercise the necessary will to enact the laws and policies necessary to preserve our environment. And in order to put people like this in place, citizens, especially well-educated citizens, such as we hope that you will become, need to understand the issues involved and be able to make intelligent judgments on what these people are, what these people stand for, and what they're willing to do in order to help preserve the environment and the earth, not only for us, but for our future.